friends, here's a question that's asked of me quite a bit in the civil area, such as like a motorcycle accident, car accident, products liability case. Gee, should we go to trial or should we take the offer that's on the table? Maybe an offer was made at a settlement conference or mediation and you decided not to take it. And then we're further along into the case. We're spending more money on cost because you have to have experts come in, doctors come in for your trial and talk about your injuries. And then, do you really want to roll the dice? Because that's what it is. It's a gamble. You don't know how any number of jurors are going to either side with you or side with the defendants. But here's sort of the real issue. You decide to go to trial and you hit the jackpot. You get, let's say, $1 million on a $600,000 case. And you're like, wow, we did great, we did great. Here's the problem. There's no finality, no end after the jury comes back with a verdict. In other words, the defense can file a motion for a new trial, or they can go ahead and wait until a final judgment is filed with the court for $1 million, and then they can appeal that. And then they can tie your money up for 2 years, 3 years in the appellate process, maybe even longer, depending on how many different things are appealed and how high the appeal gets. And for the defendants to do that, they have to file or post a cost bond. And so this thing is not over with. Just because the jury says you win $1 million doesn't mean you're going to get a check the next day. And that's what I try to teach my clients, that there's no finality to it, but there is when you settle the case. And it's always been said with lawyers that if both sides walk away from the table upset, then the mediator or the settlement conference judge has done a good job. So if you're a gambler, then you can go ahead and do that. But just keep in mind that there are just so many different variables in the trial that can happen. And then as we get closer to the trial, each side starts filing motions to narrow down the issues, maybe preclude one of your experts, things along that line. So it gets expensive, it gets time consuming, then you're hanging out with this case that maybe I've been working on for 3 years, now you got another 2 years if in fact it gets appealed. On the other hand, if you end up not ringing the bell and the verdict comes back a lot less than we both assumed the case was worth, you can file an appeal. And then an appellate attorney ends up briefing the case to the Arizona Court of Appeals, maybe to the Arizona Supreme Court, and then once again it's tied up again. So again, there's no finality to a jury verdict. Sometimes both sides walk away and accept what the jury says, sometimes they don't. No insurance companies today, they typically will appeal if a verdict is what they consider to be unreasonable. And just so you know, if you have a case that's worth $50,000 or less, you have to go through what's called mandatory arbitration. And arbitration is like a trial, except it's usually held in a lawyer's office. The court appoints an arbitrator who's supposed to be a non-biased, independent person, or both myself and the other side, the defense lawyers, agree upon somebody that we think is a stand-up person and will render a fair ruling. And an arbitration is not costly, and that's one of the reasons why we have mandatory arbitration in a case worth $50,000 or less, so people can avoid the expense of a trial. And you go ahead and go to arbitration, and either side, depending on what happens, can appeal that arbitration award. And then you end up in a jury trial. If your case is worth more than $50,000, you don't have to go through mandatory arbitration. But again, the safest bet, unless you're a gambler, is to try to get the case settled so there's finality in the amount and you can finally get on with your life. Hope that's understandable with you. Thank you.
This posted video is in no way specific legal advice on any subject. It is intended to provide general information for the public. If you need specific legal advice, call Chuck at 480-545-0700.